Something like that.
Killer. So maybe maybe a good place to start is, what are you practicing these days?
Practicing, well, it's a whole bunch of stuff in such a way, because now I'm like really entering to this realm of teaching. And I'm 6 years in at the University of Connecticut, UConn, go Huskies. And 2 years in at the University of Hartford, which is my alma mater, the Hart School of Music, the Chet McLean Institute. And so it's, it's giving the students a lot of material, but I find myself like really working on that stuff and making sure I'm able to play it, making sure I'm able to communicate it, and being able to be open enough to, dive deeper and find ways of breaking certain things down or flipping a certain kind of way. So I guess to really answer your question, some of it is like learning tunes. I'm always showing or telling my drummers, know the melodies of songs. So know the rhythm note for note, know its inflection, and being able to improvise over the form. So that's kind of one section. I'm kind of finding myself with this semester, particularly working in the Jim Chapin book, The Advanced Techniques of a Modern Drummer, or maybe for a Modern Drummer, I'm not sure. But yeah, that one, just different ways of flipping certain things, and then ultimately just like composition, like just like writing. I think that's a way that I'm like practicing as an artist, because of course I have my own band. So just trying to compose, like think of different ways of stepping outside of like my norm as a composer. Because my band, we've been together for we've been playing for over like 15 years, but I'll say professionally, like having a record since 2017, 2018. So let's say like 6 years in a little bit, if I'm doing the math right. And I think I find myself having a sound as a composer, but then I kind of want to challenge myself more. So I'm kind of like reaching outside of like my norm of like what things can I pull from on a compositional level and a musical level too. So I think it's kind of like just like a plethora of stuff that I try to embody.
Yeah, let's get super granular.
Yeah.
Because one thing that I'm fascinated by is going from a template like John Riley's book or Jim Chapin's book to being truly creative with something.
Yeah.
And so I think we both know the type of stuff that's in John's book or in the Chapin book. And what you were just doing is like that iterated to a few degrees. So there was the hi-hat ostinato.
Yeah.
There's the hi-hat as a syncopation voice. So kind of halfway in between 2 and 4 and being a full comp voice. And then there's the sort of textural development. So like you would do you start an ostinato with the hats, and then you would like experiment with the motif, but then you would carry that motif through and then change the texture. Like for instance, 2 hands on one cymbal, snare and left ride, and then you'd repeat the same thing over on the right side, like snare and fuller tom. So do you do a lot of that sort of thing when you practice?
Yeah. So I would say like the genesis of that was probably through the process of me studying with my former teacher, Eric McPherson. So he was the drum professor at the University of Hartford, where I went there. And so just watching him play was just amazing, and talking to him was amazing. But certain things in those 4 years that really stood out to me was a couple things. Well, first was he had this sheet. It was called the Rhythm Matrix, and it basically focuses on groupings of 2s and 3s, and like the notated. When you see the page, it's notated like a dotted quarter note, different series of a dotted quarter note and a quarter note. The dotted quarter note will represent a grouping of 3 eighth notes. A quarter note will represent a grouping of 2 eighth notes. And so those variations of 2s and 3s will give you an ostinato, whatever. And so we would kind of like deal with that and just the different ways you can, do it through rudiments. You can do it through a groove, through swing, soloing. And I really took that and just like created like this whole curriculum. So, as far as like this semester, I'm trying to change it up and do some different things. But like as far as like a Jonathan Barber, like study guide, is probably through that whole, thing, like the Rhythm Matrix. which is again kind of deals with ostinato texture, like things of that nature. So I think it definitely has built a certain kind of sensibility, and I think I also must kind of point out too that like I try to play things that are meaningful to my band, to other band members. Like I'm not really so like, fond of like, okay, I'm learning some chops, or like, let me like really put this lick in. Because 9 times out of 10, like, it's only going to serve like my drummer peers. And shout out to all the drummers out there. But like, I really want to impress the bass player. I really want to impress the piano player, because these are the ones that's going to recommend you for other gigs or hire you, better. So I try to like play things that can really, apply in the music and that really serves the music. So again, texture, dynamics, creating some kind of ostinato or some kind of groove that it might be linear, or it could be kind of unorthodox, but at least it's something that people can latch onto.
Yeah, I have a bunch of thoughts on this. First of all, Emac, one of the most underrated jazz drummers, I think. Myron Walden, Like a Flower Seeking the Sun. Bo, bodo, bodo.
Iconic. Iconic.
So good. When I first moved to town in the early 2000s, I would see him at the Jazz Gallery, and I would just be like, how come no one's talking about this dude? It was like the continuation of Tony Williams. I felt like he should have been included in the canon with like the Bill Stewarts and the Brian Blades. But when it comes to that, like playing something drumistically impressive versus something that serves the music, obviously somebody I come back to a lot is Brian Blade. And for me, it's even useful to think about him when I have like internet FOMO or whatever, like, oh, do I go into this chop thing, or do I explore like this musical direction or something? And one heuristic I kind of have is, I wonder how many people ever said, I wish Brian had busted out some cold-blooded singles, like at the end of a Wayne Shorter gig or something like. Probably no one. Right. So just having those kind of avatars in our heads for drummers that take the music to a higher level, and you're not necessarily missing the chops, and the chops are just a means to an end to do that. But the other thing that brings up for me is like odd groupings. So obviously dotted quarters and quarters can make 5, 7, 9s, depending on how you arrange them. And I think there are kind of a couple of directions to go for that. So it's like, you could think about ostinatos as their own meter, and then like parallel thinking, maybe one thing I've been thinking about is establishing an ostinato with some part of the body, some part of the groove, and then doing something that's contrary to that ostinato. So if I'm learning to play in 9, like having some part of my body acknowledging the 9s that I can't cheat, but then practicing like 2, 3, 4, 5 beat phrases over the top of that, and then like moving the ostinato, because the ostinatos, like where it is kind of arbitrary. But then odd meters within 4. Right, because ultimately it's all kind of the same thing, except when it comes to the composition itself, right? Any how's that land?
It's definitely, I just think of it as like a feeling. You know what I mean? Like I always tell my students, like you just have to feel it, which is really hard to teach. It's like either you feel it or you don't, and if you don't feel it, then you have to go through the steps to feel it. But yeah, so yeah, it is a feeling for me. But also like on a mechanical level, I kind of tell, I show my students that you can kind of maximize what you already know just by taking like a phrase, and even if you move one limb around the kit, just do same sticking, it can have just a completely different like feel and effect to it. So like that's kind of like where I'm at, or like a lot of things that I do, I might take like a certain kind of pattern or certain like sticking and just see, okay, like what if I move my left hand, or if I move my right hand, or if I put it on the cymbals, or add a bass drum to it, or just keep, the sticking stationary in one part of the drum, and then let either my hi-hat or my kick kind of be free to kind of improvise over that, And so again, I think that kind of gives this organic kind of flow, You know what I mean? Because at the end of the day, like I just want to. My aim always when I play, I just want to flow. Like I just want to just be like running water where it's not really hiccups. The direction may change, which is fine. I'm open to that. But as far as like when I'm creating, there's such a connection and a flow with that.
There's a lot there. So yeah, first of all, this idea of music being a feeling, and ultimately what teaching is about being to convey that feeling to a student. Even if we come down to something like a double stroke roll or what it feels like to play the ride cymbal. Like, so we have to put that into words, and words are imperfect. So we just try to use our words to get students to approach the vicinity of when they're going to start to feel it. And once they feel it, then they've got it. And that's one of the biggest challenges of teaching. But the other thing I think about too is like exercises as a means to, not necessarily just because they're hard for their own sake, but to force us to grow. Because for me at least, without constraints, I'll tend to always default to the same thing. So if I want to broaden the lexicon so that when I'm flowing, when I'm in stream of consciousness, I'm not just recycling the same few ideas or same few places. I feel like I need things like, oh yeah, play this 7-note ostinato with the left foot and then flow in 4 over the top of that. Just like to sort of break the log jam. Do you ever think about stuff that way?
Yeah, I think I'll be lying to say that like we all have a certain kind of bag that feels comfortable to us that we kind of like resolve to or result in. But primarily like I just try to just commit. You know what I mean? Like, yeah, I try to commit. And there's sometimes like in lessons, you know, I'll tell my students, like, you know what? Okay, here's like a minute, just play. You know? And sometimes like I would see them, you can see in their faces how they kind of like will like fight through something or like, oh, I don't like that, or, you know, and it's like, no, like embrace that idea. Like, you know what I mean? Like you may not like it because maybe you didn't mean to do it, but it has intention and it has a place for it. And I think you should embrace it, and you just never know what can come out of it. So yeah, I think for me, it's about like committing to it, but also too is like, sometimes you kind of have like this element of surprise too. Like you do something, you be like, wow, like, oh, like that was cool, you know? And so it's like, you want to kind of, you know, be present, you know, with that as well. So yeah, I would say kind of like those things is something I kind of tend to think about.
I feel like there's kind of a spectrum, at least in the way people describe it, in terms of the type of flow that people get into. Like, for me personally, like I'll try to get into a headspace where there's no judging at all, where I'm kind of just following the idea.
Yeah.
And I'm not really like the conductor of an orchestra. I talked to Jairus Yokley, and he said like he's very conscious about conducting the orchestra, especially if he's doing a solo with Jose James or something. Like he's thinking about the structure of it and where is it going, and he wants to create surprise and like vibe with the audience. Where do you feel like you fall on that spectrum, or does it depend? Like where the muse hits you?
Yeah, I think it does depend. Similar to I think what you said. I always think about it as like a story and like an arc, especially like, you know, when it comes to like playing a song, you know, any kind of genre sensibility. But I think about that arc, or where am I trying to get to with this song, or like, you know, what's the intention of my band as well? Because again, like primarily, you know, we are kind of accompanying, you know, a solo, you know, of some sort. So I think about that a lot, and how I can be a good host to that, and how I can make it interesting, but also too, like how I can keep the story alive, going from one solo to the next, you know, like how to keep it moving, you know, breathing kind of thing. And so also, but I guess like too, like on a drum level, I think about, I mean, like you kind of said it, like as far as like just like texture, and I forgot something else that you said. But the point that I'm making is like, this is something that I would do like when I like practice, as far as like playing swing, I would say, okay, like I'm gonna play swing or play a swing pattern. The right tone will be consistent, and of course there's gonna be some comping going on, but I'm gonna just remove all the bar lines. Or I'm not gonna think in 4-bar phrases. I'm not gonna think in 8-bar phrases. I'm gonna just kind of like flow and create while keeping this stationary. So it'll be something along these lines. Something like that. You know what I mean? Like it'll just be a thing where it's just kind of like I'm just kind of like creating, and seeing like what can I pull from, like what are some phrases that I can just catch and loop, or playing 3-bar phrases, 5-bar phrases, whatever, but just not think so like a grid. You know what I mean? When I think about like the Miles Davis Quintet and some of those songs, like as far as like the changes, it felt really like nebulous of like one or like the top, like they're just kind of like just playing, and then when they're done, it'll kind of go into something else, and it's kind of like that feeling and flow is something that like I always am like inspired by.
Do you find it hard to escape the feeling of 4? Like even listening to you now, I couldn't get 1, 2, 3, 4 out of my head. Not that your phrasing was confined, like your phrasing was very over the bar line, but my brain just wanted to count to 4.
Yeah, I mean, like that's something. There's a level of concentration too and focusedness that's like so embedded in music and what we do as creators. So, but again, like to my point, like the thing that I tell them is like, okay, like play all that stuff, but just like remove the bar lines where you're just kind of like, flowing and being free. Like there's so many, of course, like I'm not saying like I'm like the innovator of it. I mean, rest in peace, Jack DeJohnette. Like that's someone that I look to and be like, man, that's, he was doing that. And of course, Tony and Elvin, all the greats. But yeah, I mean, like it's something to kind of like, some things like to let go,
Totally. I'm interested in talking about students and people being earlier in the process of learning. And one thing that having students has really made me cognizant of is this paradox of seeking excellence, but also giving yourself creative space. And the internet's made all of this worse. It's made everybody more self-conscious. But have you thought about this much? Like, in other words, like helping your students find a place, a basis from which they can feel creative and trust their own voice, but then reconciling that with what we're moving towards when we practice, whether that's more precision, better control of our ideas, et cetera, and just like that psychological balance.
So there is like a process that I, put my students through and be verbally talk about this. So like the first process is, which I call like the naive practice. So it's basically like you sit on the drums, you just play whatever comes to you, some may think you're noodling around, whatever, but you're just, just kind of like just being free, like free thinking, or just letting your thoughts go. Then the second one is the discipline practice, which is okay, syncopation, page 5, whatever, or Jim Chapin book, Stick Control, whatever, page 5. And then you have like the mentor practice, which is like you're taking a piece of information. Basically, you're taking a piece of information that you cannot figure out on your own. And that's why you have teachers, mentors, whoever. And so, I always tell them, I say, okay, which practice is most important? The naive, the discipline, and the mentor. And so some people might say discipline, naive, whatever. And I'm like, you need all of it. At the end of the day, you need that naive practice, because that's how you get creative and you figure things out. And you're like, like I like that. Like you become in tune with yourself as a musician. Again, that creative space. You need the discipline practice for the focusedness, and I think that's what you need for the real world. Like, like you have to learn someone's music, or if someone makes a correction to a chart or has an idea that they come up with in the spot, you have to be disciplined enough to kind of hone in on what this person is asking for and to be able to deliver that. And the mentor practice is important because that's the essence of the tradition, of that's how things get passed down from one elder or one teacher to the student to the teacher. They pass it down. So you always need that, because there's not only nothing new under the sun, but that's how things get preserved, I guess.
Yeah.
Or just the information remains, if you will. So I tell them, like, it's really important to kind of go through those practices. And also too, like, not even so much, it can be as something as like, when it comes to the mentor practice, not even so much of just like, studying with someone, going to a lesson, but like just seeing someone live. Like, you know what I mean? Like, yes, I had a teacher, Eric McPherson, but I mean, I would check out Nasheet Waits live. I would check out Lewis Nash live. I would check out Ralph Peterson live. Like these, musicians. So I'm watching, okay, what are they doing with the bass drum, with the hi-hat, or how they tune the drums, or the cymbals that they choosing, or their balance, their dynamic level, the musicianship, like all of that. I think that's all part of like the mentor practice, where you get to really witness their artistry in real time, up close and personal. So I tell them, like, it's really important to kind of have all of that. So it's like, yes, you want to be disciplined. You want to check out recordings and, transcribe and practice and shed different things. But you also want to give yourself like room to just explore and take all the things that you learn from a mentor or from the discipline practice, and being able to like really see if you can kind of put it into your own words in real time with your friends, jamming out, or at a jam session, or, in your own band and own compositions and things like that.
What about Hard Knocks? Do you ever have students ask you about real world situations where maybe a band leader was not very nice to them, or maybe just a stressful situation where they have a bunch of songs to learn in a very short amount of time and they're sweating bullets over it? That seems like another one that's paradoxical, because we need to learn to have a thick skin, but at the same time, like, we don't want to turn people off to music.
Yeah. Now, I mean, when it comes to social media, like I realize that students or the younger generation, it feels like they're like very afraid to like make a mistake, because of course it can just be captured online or not just even captured online, like, people just kind of frown upon it. But it's kind of like, maybe we all make mistakes. Like, we all have our moments where we might crash and burn, or just, or just we have moments where we're just developing, So I mean, that's totally normal. But yeah, I mean, I have gotten that over, the years, and I try to just be understanding. I try to assist in any way. Of course, I'm not a licensed therapist, but I do have some level of experience that I can, share and kind of help them navigate and just be a sounding board to what they're saying. But I mean, as far as retention, that is something that's really important, to have too. And professionalism is huge. You know what I mean? Like, it's one thing to be like super talented, but you want to make sure that you are responsible. You can't. I try to tell students, like, just in life, like, you just can't fight every battle. You know what I mean? Like, of course, you know, recognize what's for you, what's not, and fight for what you believe in. But if you're putting like 150% in every thing to be corrected, man, you can like really burn yourself out, you know, like mentally and emotionally too. So, you know, like that's how I kind of tell them to navigate. But yeah, I mean, it's interesting, you know, because yeah, we live in a society where it's just kind of like everything is just like so in your face that it's okay to kind of like take a step back. It's okay to rest. Like, man, you know, a lot of students be like, man, like, do you ever get burnt out or do you ever get like tired of playing drums? I'm like, yeah, I do. But again, like you find other things that interest you, you know what I mean? And so then when you come back to your instrument, you have this fresh approach and perspective and also mindset. And 9 times out of 10, like I feel so much better and I feel like, oh, like, you know, I feel like I can play something that I appreciate or play something that's musically cool because I can respond with like fresh ears and a fresh mind.
A few months ago, I made a video called The Cave where I was in a particularly frustrated spot myself. Mm-hmm. I don't want to say completely related to, but it was brought on by some online criticism, mm-hmm. which I think in my own mind, I recognized was correct. And that made me upset. So I'd identified a gap between where I was and where I wanted to be. So I felt like I did the Neiman Whiplash, ice my hands, play till I bleed thing. Of course, I didn't injure myself, but yeah. There was a very angry energy to the practice. Just like, fuck the world. I'm going to play these single stroke drills on Evans Sound Off pads for like an hour a night, no matter what. Mm-hmm. Have you had periods like that, or do you find that it's a different energy?
Yeah, I mean, there are times where I get frustrated like in life, but I mean, I don't necessarily know. I wouldn't say, you know, based off of what like someone said or like the internet, you know, because it's kind of like, in my opinion, I think you'll never win, you know, with the internet. Like, you know, you can like really sound killing, and someone's gonna be like, yeah, but you know, your head was crooked, or like, you know, the shirt was like not wrinkled or wrinkled or something like that, you know. So I don't know. But as far as like, you know, of course, if you feel like you're not sounding your best, or you're trying to reach something that you aren't reaching yet, I think, yeah, that's normal. I think for me, like maybe my frustration has kind of been a little bit with like the industry. You know what I mean? It's interesting that like in life, like almost everything has reached a level of inflation except for like the music industry. You know, there's like that one interview, I think like Dave Weckl was talking about like just like the gap or the consistency in pay in like the 80s till now, you know what I mean? And he's totally right about that, which is crazy. So yeah, like, you know, even, you know, just like doing gigs is like sometimes like the same. So sometimes, yeah, like I get like frustrated in that, you know, capacity, but I think I just tell myself just to continue to be a light, to, you know, to serve, and you really never know like who's watching you and like who's inspired and like how much you can help your community or like the next person, you know what I mean? And so I try to hold on to that. But of course, I mean things are, you know, can get frustrating, but you know, I hope that, you know, people that are, let's say, frustrated or you know, feel some kind of way about what someone has said, can like really take that as motivation, not to, you know, get back at them to be, okay, well, look, I can't play fast, or look, I can't play good, but just to be, okay, you know what, like I'm going to, you know, like pour back into myself and, you know, just deal with the music, you know what I mean? I think at the end of the day, like it's all about the music, you know what I mean? And music can be very self-serving, but I think like the true essence is to be in service of. And I think that's the way that I look at it. I think sometimes we have these moments where we can choose to be like, all right, I'm gonna take this moment, I'm gonna be self-serving, or I'm going to let you know how great I am, and I'm gonna let you know that I am like top 5, top 3, or the best. But I think if you just like kind of like be in service of, then you will always be working. And if you're working, then you can support yourself in any kind of capacity, and then you can enjoy life in other ways and means outside of like this instrument. Like you can become the instrument that serves the world, So that's kind of where I'm at.
Yeah, I find it's an interesting question in terms of how people break down along those lines, because I think some people come from kind of a frustration. I'm going to show the world they're wrong. Some people come from more of a just pure creative exploration. Like I'm really enjoying this thing and I'm just following this seam. Some people have just like a super whimsical relationship with the drums. Like, hey, I feel like playing today. And then they string enough of those days together. I think, well, one thing I'm interested in is when you were starting to play, did it always feel easy and fun, or was there a period where you kind of had to push through before you broke through and it was more consistently rewarding to play?
Yeah, so I mean, I started playing the drums in church, almost like a typical story, but my dad played drums in church, and I would watch him. I was like, front row seat watching him. And what was beautiful about that experience was the church, it was like a family church. So his sister and her husband were the pastors, and they used to rent out a YMCA. And so we would just take the drums from home, bring it to the YMCA, set them up, have service, break them down, bring them home, send them back up in the house. So I was like his roadie, like drum tech at like 5, like, you know what I mean? So I knew with the hi-hat, the clutch, the snare stand, the beater, like I was like really hands-on. So I was fascinated with that, to say, wow, all these pieces can come together to like form like this sound. And then just the responsibility that the drummer has, with the church service, like as the drummer is playing a groove, like everyone's like dancing or just like bobbing their head. I'm like, man, like that's really cool. So just that ability was something that I kind of resonated with. So middle school, high school, I was playing in church. So of course you have like it wasn't so much of gospel chops, but you know what I mean? Like it was a certain kind of way, there's a certain kind of attack, a certain kind of feel that you just have to have. And which was cool. And like, I mean, that's my foundation, but I was kind of like thinking to myself, like, there has to be something else too. Like, like this is great. And like, like hitting hard is great. But I don't know. I was kind of just like longing for something else, And then once I got going into my senior year, that summer, I went to a summer jazz camp pretty much at the Artist Collective, which is founded by the late, great Jackie McLean. And I was just blown away. I was transformed because that's when I got into jazz. And then I heard, Art Blakey and of course, all the records from Jackie McLean and just like John Coltrane. And I was just kind of like, man, okay, like this is what I want to do. And this is something I just resonated with. So it was that period where I'm just kind of like, man, this is fun. This is exciting. But it was a lot to learn. Of course, because I didn't like really know tunes or just, I couldn't, tell you who Elvin Jones was, but I was like, man, like this is super cool. So again, I felt like I was like a late bloomer when I got to Hart. I'm staying with Eric, and I just became a sponge, like whatever, like he was saying. And also like my classmates too, they were like very advanced and, checking out all these recordings. So I'm like, hey, what are you listening to? Okay, let me write that down. Let me listen to it. Or, just having listening sessions with your friends and okay, like, what does this mean? Or like, what are you listening for? And just kind of like just being in that community, if you will. And I would say like, I remember my freshman year, I feel like I grew the most. Like I really saw like, it was almost like 0 to 80. It's just like things just started, connecting. I started to understand like the language, phrasing, touch and all that stuff. So I think for me, like, yeah, I have those moments where like as a drummer, I can kind of pinpoint certain points in my life where I'm like, yeah, like I've seen this growth. Then also like, once I got to New York, that was a whole thing of just kind of like just being aware and playing with a certain kind of intensity, not necessarily volume, but a certain kind of like, feel and attack, you know, and then like as a band leader, as an artist now, as a composer, as a teacher. So like, and I pray that there'll be moments, even years to come, that I will have these growth spurts as an artist. You know what I mean? But yeah, I think it's always a challenge, but you just have to have some kind of like joy in it, and treat like, and have like a little level of like, man, like this is fun, you know? Because that's how I think you can kind of, you know, just, I guess be a good host to yourself, because there's so much things that's thrown at you. Like you have to just like have some moments where you're like, man, this is really fun. You know, like this is really cool. And like, wow, like I understand, like I get it, you know? So yeah.
Yeah, I feel like these days, if I'm lucky enough to string together enough good practice sessions, it almost feels like therapy. Like I can leave whatever else is going on in life behind for a little while. And I feel like for a lot of my students, more even than getting them gigs or something, or getting them Instagram followers, like that's the stage I want them to get to, where it's just like enjoyable every time they sit down on the kit. What else was I going to ask? Oh, so you were coming from church music, and you say you first discovered some of the jazz greats late in high school. Gospel music, obviously, like very precise, very quantized. Everything is perfect, right? And then you hear Elvin Jones or Art Blakey. How did that strike you the first time you heard those guys?
Yeah, funny enough, it's like I loved it, you know? And interesting, like I left this part out. So when, so of course I grew up in the church, listened to gospel music, but one cool thing that my dad did, like, you know, I remember every Saturday he would like open up all the windows and he would like wash his car, and it would just be like blasting music. And he was like blasting like a lot of instrumental music. Like, I guess some may call it smooth jazz, but not really. But like, you know, come to find out, like it was like, okay, Yellow Jackets, like Weather Report, you know, like George Duke, you know, Jeff Lober, you know what I mean? Like it was like a lot of those records that was really like musical, but of course it had like no lyrics. And I thought that was like really cool, because like some of my friends, I guess they maybe were in like a little more strict backgrounds where like, oh, you can't listen to secular music, or like anything outside of like church, you cannot listen to it. But like for him, like it wasn't just like gospel music playing in the house. And I think maybe because it didn't have lyrics, that you can kind of like create your own like imagery, if you will. So it's like when I was a kid and I was like listening to like Yellow Jackets in particular, I like heard those melodies. I was like, oh man, this is like beautiful. Like, you know what I mean? Like, yeah, like, I wouldn't like really hear that in church, so to speak, but like, man, like that's just beautiful. And I didn't think of it as like secular. I just thought of it as like really good music and like something really heartfelt, you know? And so I guess like it was like a little like introduction to like, you know, when I got in, you know, hearing like Art Blakey and Elvin, I was just like, man, like that's really cool. You know what I mean? Because like just like on like a drummer level, like that's, wow, like that's different. Like, I mean, shout outs to all like, you know, the gospel drummers that I heard on recordings, like still my favorites, but just like on the other side of like Art Blakey, Max, Roy Haynes, I'm just like, man, like that is really cool how they're just getting that sound out of the drums, and how like they really get to express, you know, more than just kind of like, you know, like having like this one lane or this one role, if you will. And I just think too, like as I was getting older, like I was kind of like hearing more a little bit. I kind of wanted to do more, and it's like I kind of couldn't, you know, like I couldn't just because of like that's not what that music was calling for, you know, as far as like, you know, in gospel music. But this really allowed me to like explore myself, you know, and my creativity. So it was just such a beautiful thing. But yeah, like when I first heard like Art Blakey or Elvin, like it didn't really feel like foreign to me, of like you know, something that was like really different. Of course, it was like a state, like I had to like really figure it out. But I really gravitated, you know, towards that like a lot. And of course, like when I heard Tony, I was like really blown away by that. And I just think it's something about his his touch or his attack that I think kind of resonates with, like, let's say, like gospel drummers. Like I feel like Tony, in the world of jazz, I noticed like a lot of like gospel drummers like kind of gravitate towards Tony, and I think it's something about his touch that it kind of resonates. There's a small parallel to that, to that level of attack. So I remember when I first heard Tony, like that changed my life, and of course I just binged on all of his recordings and the stuff that he was on in videos and things of that nature. But yeah, like that was just a moment where it felt like a level of like belonging, like, you know what, like I belong in this realm. Because again, like going back to let's say like gospel drumming, like it's beautiful. I think it's one of the most influential like spectrums of music, in my opinion. But also too, like on the flip side, you can kind of feel out of place, like if that's not really like your approach, or like if you don't chop a certain way, like you can kind of almost feel like left out, a certain kind of way, or like there might not be a place for you.
It's very specific, isn't it?
Yeah. And so like that's kind of where I was almost feeling a little bit. The fact that I wasn't like chopping like a certain kind of way, or like or even really just had that mindset of just kind of like, I'm about to just like blaze through these 4 bars or whatever. You know what I mean? So it's just like, I feel like that has a moment, and that's beautiful too. But also like 4 quarter notes on a cymbal, like can really speak volumes and really move a crowd too. So, again, I think it's about like what's in the heart. But again, when I got into jazz and like heard the Art Blakeys and the Elvin Jones, and I'm just like, it just felt like, in this moment, this is where I belong, and it felt like there was a place for me, I
want to dive into something a little bit technical. From a gospel background, when you first started playing jazz, did you feel well prepared to play the ride cymbal, or did you feel like you needed to learn a different technique?
Yeah, that's a good question. Well, funny enough, so before I got into the Artist Collective, like that year, I did a jazz band at my high school. And from 4th grade to 10th grade, I was playing alto saxophone, because you just had to pick an instrument, and they weren't doing drum sets. So I was like, okay, I'm gonna pick saxophone. So I remember I'm in my section, and we're playing Blue Bossa, Kenny Dorham. And so the drummer was having a hard time playing like a bossa nova groove. And I made some comment, and I was just kind of like, I mean, it's not that hard, And so the band teacher was like, yeah, but you can't do it. And I was like, oh, I bet you I could. Because he didn't know I played drums for all that time. So then I got on the drums, got doon, and he was like, you play drums? I was like, yeah. He's like, you're the new drummer. like he had no idea. So again, I mean, of course you can tell, like I'm open-handed, playing lefty. He's like, yeah, but you have to play righty. And I was like, what? He's like, man, all the greats play righty. Like Elvin, Blakey, I didn't know who these people were. Elvin Jones, Art Blakey, Max Roach, they all play righty. And I was like, oh my God, I've been playing drums wrong my whole entire life. So I was just kind of like distraught a little bit. So I kind of started out playing the right cymbal righty. Then that summer, I go to Arts Collective. Renee McLean was teaching. And so we were like, playing, I forgot what song it was, but like almost like every like 2 or 4 bars, I'm switching hands, like dang, dig it, 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 dang, dig it. And he stops the band, and he's like, what are you doing? Like, I'm just like, well, I'm comfortable playing with my left, but the tradition is really in the right hand. And he was like, man, you don't play for the look, you play for the feel. Boom, mind blown. And so I'm just kind of like, all right, like I'm playing what feels good. I'm playing for the feel, for the sound, So with that being said, I guess it didn't, it wasn't like this big adjustment with like the ride cymbal as far as technique. It was just like the musicality of it. So of course, like I had to not play as heavy, if you will. Like as far as like to be able to get my touch together, because of course, like, I will say it's not like when you play jazz, you have to play quiet. I'm not necessarily saying that, but I think you should have like a touch where you can play whatever you want to play, loud, soft, and everything in between, you know. And sometimes that's the hard part where people can really only play at one kind of volume, you know. So yeah, no, it wasn't really an adjustment so much. I think just the adjustment was more of like understanding like the language of it rather than like the mechanical aspect. Because again, it's kind of like, you know, the two feel versus, you know, understanding like an ABA form, making sure you're playing like the top of the, you know what I mean? Like it was stuff like that it was like a learning curve for me. I was kind of like, okay, you know, okay, this is what a 12-bar blues sound like. Okay, this is what rhythm changes sound like. Okay, cool. Like, you know, just learning about, let's say, harmonic motion. Of course, like at the time I didn't know, you know, the changes of a blues or rhythm changes. But at least like understanding harmonic motion of like knowing what the 4 chord is, like, you know, like in a blues, you know, things like that. So it was more about the language rather than, I would say, like mechanical.
What about beat placement? Did you find that was an adjustment from the music you used to play? I think about this with some of my students because, yeah, I was watching a video somebody sent in where they're playing with a jazz band, and I found myself saying, yeah, it's just occurred to me that if you're playing that sort of New York Smalls style jazz, there's a really specific place the bass player is expecting the ride cymbal. And if you play it in the same way you'd play like alternative rock, like right in the center of the beat, like it's going to feel too weighty. But did you ever, was that an issue or did it kind of just follow naturally?
I think it was just falling naturally. I think it was more about like just listening, like just making sure like I'm just listening to the bass player, listen to the band, to the tempo. I mean, yeah, I think maybe I'm just like fortunate in that way of just like being around musicians that were just embracing, not just kind of like, nope, here it is right here. You find that, you follow me. It was kind of like more of like just like adjusting to each other. But ultimately, you know, it was more about just making sure like I'm hearing what's going on, you know, as far as like that's kind of one way of, I think, being a good conductor is like being able to really hear what's going on with everyone, having that balance and that blend to where everything kind of feels, you know, cohesive. Because I think like naturally too, like we all have a certain kind of, not just feel, but a way that we hear things. Like, you know, some people might say like, that person's on top, or that person's behind, that person's on, you know. And I just think it's about being aware of that sensibility, more importantly. Yeah.
Tell me about your band. How did you guys get started? What's the most exciting thing for you on the horizon?
So we all started in college at the University of Hartford. And it was just one of those things where we just all kind of playing a lot together. You know, for me, like, I love to practice, but I love to practice with other people. You know, I love to just like shed, if it's with another drummer or a saxophone player or a full band, whatever, like it just, I feel like I get to really practice other things that you just cannot practice, or you can't get if you just practice by yourself, you know? So we would like play a lot together. And around like the Hartford area, like, you know, I would get gigs or someone would get gigs, we still play together, but it got serious like once we all moved to New York. At the time, like, so my band was myself, pianist Taylor Gable, guitarist Andrew Renfro, and bassist Matt DeWanzik. Like us four graduated from the University of Hartford, and we pretty much all moved to New York, you know, together. And once, like pretty much right away, I got asked to do the late night set, to do a Monday night session at 1 a.m. like right after Ari Honing, which was like a whole other thing. And I was like, oh, great, you know. But that was beautiful because it's kind of like gotta find your thing, like figure it out, you know. And it was very like too like just inspiring to, you know, to watch him as a band leader and see him like play great and being consistent of of his artistry. You know, I just feel like Ari is just like, he does Ari at all times. And I'm just like, that's really inspiring, you know, to me. So that was great. And so we would do that, and people started being like, kind of like legitimizing our band and like, oh yeah, like that band. And so then we started playing like, you know, arrangements, originals. And after a while, I was kind of like, all right, I think it's time for us to kind of, you know, be serious and like come out with a record. You know, I think we're ready. And so that's when, you know, Vision Ahead, well, first record, Vision Ahead, came out, and I named the band Vision Ahead too. So that's just been, yeah, man, that's honestly, that's just been just an amazing experience of really like having a band that really, for me, like I glory in the fact that like it's such a cohesive sound, you know, and I glory in the fact that it's not like the Jonathan Barber show, but it's like really like musical, and we all have like this team mindset. And so I would say last year I did my first European tour. So like, you know, I'm gonna to my own horn here, like, you know, independent artist. So I'm like the manager, the agent, you know, the tour manager, like all that stuff. So like that's been a whole, maybe that's like a whole other segment, if you will, of just kind of like being your own like boss and really learning about, you know, the industry, which I think maybe some of my frustrations kind of derive from that. But yeah, man, have a few records coming out, and I'm actually working on another record, which is just beautiful. I think I'm landing on number 5, I want to say, as far as like recordings, which is like, you know, wow, you know, really surprised, I guess. But it's been such a great ride, and yeah, Vision Ahead is Vision Ahead.
I feel like, I don't know if it was like this when you first moved to town, but maybe in the early 2000s, there was a lot of emphasis on being a freelancer, being a hired gun. And I feel like maybe this is partly due to the internet age, and maybe partly due to labels and management kind of going away, and everyone kind of needing to write their own ticket. But it feels like bands are much more of a thing now. And I think that's for the better. It feels like I would go to the 55 bar in 2004 and see a bunch of people sight reading. And then now, like, you go to an E-Body concert and they're playing the same songs that they've played for 15 years, and they know all the little nuances. It feels like there's more to explore that way, right?
Yeah. I know what you mean. Like, I was definitely in a space, like, although like in college until now, like, you know, I've always had like my band there, but I was also kind of like, man, I want to play with, you know, some other people, or just get that experience, you know what I mean? And I feel like to be a good leader, you know, you have to support, you know, other leaders as well. And so it's kind of like, man, shout out to all the people that I've played with over the years, because they've been so influential to me as a band leader, as a human being, you know, as a musician. So I think it is a good direction that like we're kind of seeing more bands, if you will. You know, all I just want is just like more, just like, you know, support and, you know, platforms for us to, you know, get our music heard and be, you know, compensated fairly, and you know, and have things in place where, you know, the arts can really exist in our community, you know.
Yeah. Well, I did want to double click on that. And I've been trying to formulate like a way we can take it in a positive direction.
Yeah.
But maybe I'll tell you my experience, which is a slightly dark view of the way the industry has gone, is that there's a lot of opportunity, but the opportunity to be like a supporting player in a band has kind of gone by the wayside. Now everything is kind of the influencer economy.
Sure.
And that's also pushed things toward more sensationalism. So I don't want to put anybody on blast, but it's definitely the truth in my newsfeed that what's most viral, what's most upvoted tends to be the flashiest, fastest. It's like, here's a trio from Berkeley, playing the most insane arrangement of something at 3x the tempo you'd ever play it. I don't know if that's warping everything behind the scenes, but I guess to turn this into a question, if you were king for a day and you could create like the ideal support structure for artists, do you have a conception of what that would look like? Not to put you on the spot, because that's a difficult question.
Yeah, no, I mean, I would just think, I mean, I think about wages, number one. I just think about even like policy, like, I'm gonna like butcher the name but like, I know like in France and other places, like musicians get like, I think like money from the government, like there's some kind of subsidized thing. I'm not sure like the name of it, but
something French.
yeah. But I do know some like musicians from France that they get some money by being an artist, or like basically like, what I'm saying is like they support the arts as you know such a way. So, I mean, me being an American, like I will kind of implement some of those things as well. I wouldn't necessarily. I don't know. I wouldn't like necessarily change, like, let's say like the internet landscape of being like, oh, like this person like super flashy, like he's canceled, or here she's canceled, like nothing like that. But as far as just kind of like more like structure, like I think that's kind of maybe like the frustrating thing, that it doesn't feel like it's much structure that's based off of anything really of substance, and I think maybe like that's like the frustrating thing, because no one really cares about like the substance so much. They just care about like what sells, and anything that leads to the sell, they're gonna just go with it.
Anything that gives you a dopamine hit while you're standing in line at Starbucks,
yeah,
like doom scrolling.
Right, yeah. I mean that too. So yeah, I think those some of the things that I would try to really create for musicians. But you know what, like, I guess not to get off topic too much, but like what I tell myself in these moments is kind of like time will tell. You know what I mean? And of course, like, you mentioned the 2000s, which is like, like over 20 years ago, but still is like relevant, where we've seen like different ebbs and flows of things like, oh, this is really hot, this is really popular. And then it's kind of fizzes out, or like certain trends that you think is like really hitting the ground, and it's like, it's really not. And I'm like, if you are solid in what you do and you are consistent, time will tell. You know what I mean? So again, like I don't really trip about like the quote unquote haters or people that just want to just like comment just a comment, because it's kind of like, man, time will tell, how solid this is, and time will tell about the authenticity, that if it gets up against anything that's counterfeit, it will expose it. So for me, I don't necessarily like trip too much. It's just kind of like, time will tell, you know what I mean? As far as like, if it's my playing, or if it's my band, or just like what I'm doing, like I just want to be solid and authentic in what I'm presenting, and I believe in that. And so with that being said, like I believe that, like, man, time will tell, that it will only be, for me, like a matter of time to get recognized a certain kind of way, something of substance too, and it's like I tell myself that I do want to, like monitor that as well, and make sure that I am, after the things of substance. Because I mean, there's nothing wrong with, wanting extracurricular, accolades and awards. I mean, that's beautiful, but that won't necessarily like make or break you to the authenticity of what you are as an artist,
I had another question chambered, but you used the word counterfeit, and I think maybe that's a good place to wrap up, because that dovetails with something I've been thinking about too, which is that art is subjective, but somehow I think it's also possible to be bullshit. And one of the themes I've heard emerge from what you said, especially just now in speaking about the industry, is that it's possible to be more counterfeit or more authentic, and that to a degree you even feel like you hold yourself accountable for being authentic. Am I onto something? And if so, like how does that Yeah, how do you think about that?
Yeah, I definitely hold myself to be authentic, and I think it's a responsibility that I just feel like we all have as artists, and I know some people don't really abide to that code, but I do. I just want to be as authentic as I possibly can and really, you know, like perform in a be more in service of than being self-served. You know what I mean? I think that's that's just the best way that I can put it in short terms of like really being in service of like the music and my art and the community and the culture, if you will, rather than just being like, man, like there's a bunch of people here, like if I can get house, then like yeah, like I can really like be someone, or if I can just like get this solo and I can just like do play like really fast and then just stop and wait till I get the hand claps, you know what I mean? Like I get it, like it's a formula, but yeah, like I think it's also like a mindset too. Like it's really about like what's in your heart. And I mean, people know, if they, are full of it or not, it's, yeah, people know. But yeah, I try to be, I don't know, like I try to be authentic. And I think too, like, man, shout out to like my mentors and like the people that I look up to, because that's kind of like how they hold themselves. Like when I see, again, like Eric McPherson and Nasheet Waits, like their approach to music is just like so pure. You know what I mean? It's not like they're not even thinking about like getting the crowd to be like, woo! Like they might play something that might get that, but that's not like their aim of like, man, I'm trying to, like they're like really trying to reach music in such a high level. Or like Lewis Nash, it's just like these people that I've been in contact with, like they're, like even like after they play, like I don't even see them being like, oh man, like I could have done so much better, or like, oh man, like that was rough. Like, you know what I mean? Like they like the words that they say is just so empowering, and they're just kind of like, man, this is my offering, like this is what it is. And so I think really like when I see people like that, yeah, like I see like it is a responsibility to uphold and to be a musician with integrity, So I think naturally like that's what I want to do. And of course, like, there's moments where we always want things to be better, but I think we just have to be content of where we're at and like really have good intentions, because like you just never know like what that does for someone. Like, the solo that I just played earlier, you have no idea what I was thinking about. You just heard what I was playing and you just received what I was doing. So it's important for me to be like, make sure I'm in just a good headspace, not saying that life is great and I have it all together, but just be like in this moment, like whatever I'm giving, like let it be with intention, let it be with, with love and joy, and then let the cards fall like where they fall. Of you might be like, man, like that really moved me, or maybe not, but at least I got a reaction out of it. And if you as an artist is comfortable with that and feel like that's authentic, then cool. You know what I mean? Because like only time will tell by the consistency of you just keep putting it out there. So
I think that's a great note to end on. Where would you send people to check out what you got going on?
You can go to my website, jonathanbarbermusic.com, my Instagram, JonathanB_LIVE. Bandcamp will be a great one. Yeah, all my records is on there. Of course, you can buy merch, but also you can buy the MP3s. And of course, for those who know, may not know, like most of the proceeds, if not all, but most of the proceeds go to the artist. It's not pennies or fractions of pennies per stream, but I think that really helps the artist. So Bandcamp. I'm on Threads too, but yeah, I would say my website, IG, and yeah, live shows. You can find me out in these streets. So
amazing. Thanks so much.
Thank you, man.